In this video, I'm talking about what Mondays are like, at least for most soldiers in the United States Army. What's up, my friends? Welcome to an all-new video. In this one, I am specifically going to be talking about Mondays in the United States Army, otherwise known as command maintenance. This is a big thing that usually happens for a lot of soldiers in the Army. Not everybody participates in command maintenance because maybe they don't have anything to do maintenance on, or I'm about to explain that, all right? But don't get wrapped around it. Not everybody does this, but there's a good majority of soldiers in the United States Army that are dealing with command maintenance on Mondays. Some people may call it other things, motor pool stables, motor pool Mondays, I don't know. There's probably a ton of terms, but the main common one is, usually command maintenance. So let's talk about this. This gives you a good idea of what's happening on Mondays for the most part. Usually individuals who have some kind of vehicles they have to maintain. Now, if you're in an infantry unit, maybe especially like you're in a specific type of infantry unit that doesn't have any vehicles, then maybe you're doing something else, on Mondays. Who knows, right? But if you're in a transportation unit, a supply unit, you're in, even like a tanker unit, you're a scout, whatever, you have vehicles you have to maintain. And usually Mondays are dedicated to the maintenance, to kind of the checks on those vehicles to make sure they're well maintained and they're going to work properly for missions, training, whatever the case might be. So soldiers still typically do PT in the mornings, right? But from there, they usually have a dedicated formation, probably in the motor pool at 9 o'clock or whatever, somewhere around those time frames. It could flex a little bit, but the common one is going to be 9. They form up in the motor pool, they get accountability, make sure everybody made it back safely, everybody's here in the motor pool, ready to get to work. Now on these Mondays is what it is you're going to be doing in the motor pool is doing what is called a PMCS on your vehicles. Now let's see if I remember what PMCS stands for. Preventive Maintenance Checks and Services. There you go, PMCS. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be walking around with a vehicle with an item that's called a -10. It's a manual that is a user's level kind of book to help you identify what you should be looking for on a vehicle to decide if it's working properly or not working properly. And then probably along with that -10, you probably have some kind of form that you have to annotate anything on that form that you find. If you find something's leaking, something is broken, or whatever, you got to annotate it on this form. If you're really curious, that form, it's called 2404, which is the manual version of writing it in, or you have the printed out copy you get from maintenance, which is known as the 5988. And those are just the form numbers that you're utilizing. The nice thing with like the 5988 version is that usually it'll show like some of the stuff that's already known that is wrong with the vehicle that has not yet been fixed. So you don't have to additionally write it down, where when you're doing the 2404, you kind of write everything down on that one. But soldiers are in the motor pool, they're doing the walk around of the vehicle, they're using that -10, well, they're supposed to be, but some people don't always do that. And you're going around the vehicle, you're looking at like the headlights, make sure the headlights work, make sure the turn signals work, you're checking under the vehicle, whatever type of vehicle it is that you have that you're working with, you're checking under it to see if there's anything leaking, if there's anything that looks like it's broken, starting the vehicle up, all sorts of different checks that you're doing on this vehicle. It's not always done on like your assigned vehicle. You might have a vehicle that's assigned to you and you'll be doing this PMCS on that assigned vehicle, but sometimes it's just vehicles that are in your section that need to get knocked out. So they hand out these forms to all the soldiers, the lower enlist usually, and need to get knocked out. Non-commissioned officers are kind of walking up and down the motor pool, making sure people are doing these PMCS, things they're supposed to be doing or whatever. And then the lower enlisted soldiers are the ones actually crawling under the vehicle, checking out the vehicles, whatever type of vehicle it is, to look for any kind of deficiencies on this vehicle. Now, when you're checking out this vehicle, there are certain items that are very important that could essentially what is known as deadline the vehicle, meaning that vehicle is not capable of being able to execute a mission because of a specific fault. Usually that -10, outlines some of that stuff as far as what things could possibly deadline a vehicle. There's also kind of another thing along with those whole deadline thing. There's a circle Xing something. This is a safety deadline, which means that it's not maybe necessarily something that's very dangerous to the vehicle, but maybe not up to par fully, and then that usually requires like a commander to sign off on it saying that, yeah, we'll go ahead and circle X this and we'll allow it to still get dispatched and go out on a mission, but we need to get this fixed eventually, kind of a thing. But you're going through and checking for those kind of items, usually at class 3 leaks. They have like different classes of leaks, class 1, class 2, class 3. Class 3 is usually pretty heavily dripping. Class 2, maybe it takes a little bit to slowly drip down, or class 1 where you can see like some residue around the area, but it's not really causing any drips to kind of drip down, and you're kind of categorizing what type of leak it is as far as those 3 classes. But typically like a class 3, maybe even sometimes a class 2 leak can deadline that vehicle. So that means whatever it is that deadlines that vehicle needs to get fixed before this vehicle is capable of executing a mission to get what is known as a dispatch. That is also something usually that soldiers are doing on these command maintenance days, is trying to get these vehicles dispatched as well. That way they can utilize them during the week to get missions done, to get ready for training, whatever the case is. So you have to go through, do the PMCS on it, and then once you've done a PMCS on the vehicle, you're going to get someone from the maintenance section to look over the vehicle, check it out, maybe check out your PMCS that you did to try to, either check off on it so it can get dispatched, or say, no, this vehicle is not capable of being dispatched and these items need to be fixed by maintenance, or maybe if it's user level, then at a user level before it can actually receive a dispatch. The dispatch now essentially is just like a form that you have to have before that vehicle can leave the motor pool to be allowed outside of the motor pool. If you don't have a dispatch, you are not supposed to be taking that vehicle outside of that motor pool. Commonly, they have gate guards in the motor pools that are checking those kind of things to check to see if you have a dispatch, make sure it's dated, that it's not expired or whatever, but not all motor pools will do this, but most motor pools will have gate guards that are checking dispatches before you leave the motor pool to make sure the vehicle is dispatched before it leaves. So during that Mondays with that whole dispatch process, like I said, mechanic's checking it out. If the mechanic checks off on it saying, yes, this is good, then you usually take that form over to another area. A lot of times it's called PLL. I don't know if I remember what PLL stands for. Not super important though, but you're taking it to another office to get it dispatched now. They're going to check out the 5988. They're going to check out what the maintenance person checked off on, if they signed it and all that kind of stuff, and then they are going to go through, enter this stuff into the system, and then print off a dispatch. And then from there, it usually has to get a signature. So commonly, the soldiers will finish up with all those. They'll get the dispatch. They'll put it inside of usually like a logbook, and then they'll hand it off to the NCOIC. And then the NCOIC usually, towards the end, once everybody's done all the dispatches they need to do, gather them all up, and then they take them off to get signed by the commander to actually get the final signature, which makes them official and makes them dispatched. Now, the common practice in the United States Army is usually you take lunch at 11:30 to 1. So yeah, soldiers typically sometimes will get an hour and a half lunch. Not always though. There are a lot of times when that's cut much shorter, but on average, sometimes it's, 11:30 is when soldiers are breaking for lunch and then have to be back at 1300 or 1 p.m. Now on command maintenance, that's usually a little bit stricter. Usually they will not release soldiers for lunch until noon. So usually you only have an hour lunch. Not a big deal. That's probably what a lot of people in the civilian world are used to anyways, maybe even less than that. But that is a little bit different usually than the Tuesday through Friday normal sometimes. So in the afternoon is usually dedicated for maybe finishing up certain items. You're trying to get all the vehicles done and dispatched in the morning so that way they can get signatures in the afternoon, but sometimes you're just super busy, you got a lot of vehicles, whatever the case is, and you have to finish up in the afternoon. But that's what the afternoon is kind of dedicated to, is to finish up with that, maybe bring vehicles into for maintenance that require, oil changes or other maintenances that need to be done, cleaning up the line and doing all those kind of things. You're usually still stuck in the motor pool for pretty much the whole Monday. So there you go. Hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of what Mondays for the most part are like for a lot of soldiers in the military. If you have some experiences that you want to kind of share down in the comment section of, for your motor stables or for your, PMCS days, whatever it was that it was called when you were in the military, leave some comments down below. I'd love to hear about maybe some of your experience, some of the things that you would do on your Mondays in the Army. Obviously, if you're infantry, then it probably didn't matter. It was probably the same thing every day, right? But for a lot of individuals who had vehicles, then, this is typically what happens on Mondays. If there's anything that you're maybe curious about in the United States Army, drop those down in the comment section down below. Either I'll answer them or maybe even use them as inspiration for some future videos. Alright, so there you go. If you enjoyed that video, show some love by hitting that thumbs up button. Also, check out some of the links down in the description for social media, Patreon, PO Box, all that fun stuff. Recommended videos over there. Thank you so much for watching. I'm ThatChrisChaos, and I'll see you next time. See ya.